Welcome to the Founder Experience, where we're charting the unpredictable waters of startup ventures. I'm Nathan Williams.
And I'm Alex Gutjahr.
I don't know if I ever told you this story, Alex, but when I started Minespider, we actually started as a crypto startup. We were going to do a token sale. This was back in 2017. And my original idea for Minespider was very different than it is today. So we're doing supply chain tracking. And it was sort of the next thing people thought was going to be an application of blockchain. And I got together some people and we were going to do this whole ICO token sale. And there have been other companies that were that had done token sales. They'd raised 70 million, 100 million, 40 million, 50 million. And I was all excited that, I was going to be the next multimillionaire that started with absolutely nothing. Got together some people, and I'll tell you what happened is we had actually some good people around. And then when I wrote my white paper of how it would work, I put in a lot of thought into how to make sure that it was really going to work and really on point. It is a complicated area. So it took me maybe about 4 or 5 months more than it should have and more than some other companies took. So it was really the end of 2017 when I finished. Then after that, I did get together some first investors and we were going to get ready to do this token sale. But then it was 2018 and the market crashed.
Yeah.
And then we were looking and talking, should we still do it? And we said, well, maybe we should. Yeah, we probably should. We can't just time the market all the time. So then what we did is we started talking with lawyers and finance people, because now by 2018, all of the lawmakers and the financial regulators had gotten involved and said, you got to be like really strict about how you do these token sales. Otherwise, you're going to jail. Yep. And so we said, we got to be absolutely crystal clear on this. We went and got letters from the Swiss financial authority saying, this is in line with what you're doing. But that took us a few months and everything took longer and longer. And it was by the end of 2018 that we still hadn't done the token sale. And ultimately, as we started experimenting in the market, we realized that our original vision and how we were going to do this token sale, that it might have had trouble in the real world. So we had to retool the whole design of the system, ended up getting a completely different approach to the market. And then we had to go for more traditional financing. And we never did the token sale.
Oh.
In the meantime, there were a bunch of companies that raised a few $1 million, $100 million. Have any of them gone to jail?
Nope.
Not unless they deliberately committed fraud. There was a few, but not very many. And I think there are, like, whenever you're looking at how to build a startup, there are going to be gray areas. If you out and out break laws, of course you will get in trouble. But if you're going into a gray area, the problem is if you are too cautious, you accomplish nothing. You wait too long. You wait for permission to do what you're doing, and then you don't actually do anything.
Yep.
And the danger on the other side. And so we're always sitting at the crossroads of these choices. Or I like to say it, there's a danger on each side of the path. Which danger are you more likely to fall into? Which ditch are you going to tumble into? And try to avoid the one that's most likely, right? And so that sort of leads me to where we are today. And I look at other big startups. The ones that really went big did disruption. They tried to disrupt an existing system. And by disruption, they often went into these gray areas. Uber, Airbnb. They didn't out and out break laws most of the time, but it definitely was an area where they weren't quite they weren't quite a hotel. They weren't quite sharing your place with relatives for Airbnb, or for Uber. They weren't quite a taxi, but they weren't quite just driving with your friends and carpooling. So, and they made gray area arguments in order to disrupt the existing systems. So, where's the balance in your view, and when have you run into that with your startups?
As always, it depends. Spoiler. So I unfortunately I have these kind of or these thoughts all the time. As you know, I run the telehealth clinic for medical cannabis, and this is, I mean, we are a platform provider. We are not a clinic per se, but I see many of our competitors. So the general funnel is a patient comes to the platform. They can do the onboarding, and they usually go through a questionnaire where they just indicate, okay, I'm in pain since, I don't know, a year, and provide some other context that's relevant. And then they are able to open or book an appointment with one of the doctors. And then they see the doctor, and the doctor then figures out, okay, are you good for therapy? Does it even make sense? And then they start therapy. So this is how we do it. The way many of our competitors do it is a patient comes in, they're presented a questionnaire, and based on the questionnaire, they get medical cannabis, which still needs to be prescribed. They don't have to see a doctor, which is illegal. And these companies are usually limited, sitting in Israel, Dublin, or elsewhere, what makes it really hard for the German authorities to go after them. But they just say, okay, there's just a questionnaire, and by that logic, you don't need a doctor at all, right? If you're coming in as a patient and you're just coming up with your own diagnosis, based on that diagnosis, you get a prescription for a drug. That's illegal. So, and that's one end of the spectrum. And then there's the other one where you say, okay, you play by the book, right? And for this industry that's heavily regulated, it's really hard to figure out, okay, what is allowed and what is not, right? As you and as you mentioned, there are many gray areas, and I want to start with them first. For us, I have to navigate heavy regulation in many aspects, right? There's also Heilmittelwerbegesetz in Germany, which says, okay, especially as a pharmacy, you cannot come out and say, buy this cannabis, it's good for your skin, whatever, right? You can't do this. But still, there are many things pending. Also in the European court, and so there are things that are still allowed today. And I think it's important to understand the gray area first, so understand what is not exactly forbidden today, right? This is something that you can leverage, and usually that involves talking a lot to lawyers, which is, well, it's annoying to some degree, but anyway. So figure out what is the gray area first, and how you can leverage that, right? Because then there may be some wiggle room, and often that may be enough, right? So for us, for example, I see opportunities that we can chase today that give us some leverage, but that where also the lawyer said, okay, maybe in 2 years that's not allowed anymore, and I'm fine with that because we can still bring in new patients, right? And then if the rules change, you have to adapt, which is a different story. But that's one aspect where I would say understand what the gray area is, and for everything else, understand what's the risk, right? How can you price the risk? For example, if I go out and wanna just put flyers on houses, there may be a fine that I have to pay, right? So someone says, okay, you place, I don't know, 100 flyers at Potsdamer Platz, right, where I do marketing. Now you have to pay 2,000 euro, for example. Then I could price that in. I could say that's a marketing expense, right? It's not like I think about this a lot. It's just a different term. If something is forbidden, then there are different implications. Like they can go into jail is usually what you want to avoid. Losing your life is also something that you don't want to do. But usually, ideally, but usually if there's a financial, like a price tag, right, you can reframe it as, okay, that's an expense. Am I willing to take that expense given what I expect to get out of this, right? And technically you're breaking the rule because you are fined for something. But again, it's a fine line. I want to suggest that people should do this all the time. I'm just saying, think about what's the risk and what's the reward, and does the reward justify taking the risk? And then you have to take that. That's why it depends. You have to take this on a one-by-one basis. You can't just say, okay, let's break all the rules and then YOLO, but really just figure it out one by one. So that's a lengthy answer.
If the punishment is a fine, it's illegal only for the poor. This is not a good thing, but it's just a reality of the capitalist system that we live in, unfortunately. But one thing that I remember from the early days is always being a bit unsure when you're going into these gray areas. And it's almost like there are phases to new developments, right?
Hmm.
So there was a time when e-commerce was the big thing, or the sharing economy was the big thing. It was new, it was hip. Airbnb got their first investment, and then Uber was big, and so then everyone wanted to do the sharing economy. And the question is, what could you share and what could you not?
Yeah.
And in the early phases, the idea was let's just do it and go into that gray area and say, trust us, it's okay. I'm sure someone will tell us not to. And the ones that waited and said, I'll wait till someone tells me it's okay, were way too late.
Yeah.
The next phase, after that initial Wild West, no one knows what's going on phase, I don't have a word for it, but I like to describe it as finding a framework, right? So when we were in our phase, we'd raised a little money and we were looking to do a token sale back in 2018. It wasn't the Wild West anymore.
Hmm.
But what every legal and financial person told us was you don't want to be ambiguous. You don't want to go out there and say, we're a gray area. It's not sure what we are, so we're just going to sell things. What you want to do is find a legal structure and say, we count as that. Because then you can make an argument and say, well, we are legal, right? That's a much healthier thing to do as a startup. So I will give you an example. At the time, it wasn't clear if cryptocurrency was a security
Hmm.
or whether it was not a security. And so I have a friend who did a token sale, and he found an old law that says that was made for real estate that says, well, we can package real estate and then move it and then take a percentage of this real estate,
Yeah.
one city, and exchange it with a percentage ownership of real estate in another city to hedge our bets. And they said, well, that's just an asset. Maybe cryptocurrency is a similar asset. We're basically like this real estate exchange system.
Hmm.
And the government said, okay. And so then they were able to create a security that just followed the rules of this old real estate law. Similarly, if you're building a ride sharing app, what did Uber do? They said, well, we could either be taxis and follow the taxi law, or we could be carpooling, and we're just an app that connects people that are doing carpooling. And they argued a long time about carpooling. And then by the time different governments said, no, you're not, they said, okay, well, now let's see about who we are
Yeah.
because a lot of people depend on us. And so then they had enough clout to rewrite the laws in a lot of places. So finding something to point to and say, we are this over here and be defensible is a much healthier, from a business perspective, approach than just waiting for someone to tell you what to do. If there is one last thing is that I remember hearing someone say, you don't get advice from lawyers because if you ask two lawyers, they'll give you three opinions. What you do is you say, this is what we want to do
Yeah.
to the lawyer, and they tell you what the risks are.
Yeah, that's fun. That's funny because especially with lawyers, right? If lawyers think about if they are consulting you on a matter that's not clear, which is why you have them in the first place, they always have to think about that they have to work for you if things are getting rough, right? If really someone's coming to sue you or whatever, they have to make the argument, no, we're good, right? So they always keep that in mind, like hedging them against their own future where they have to come and defend you. So that, and I've met lawyers where, especially with these gray areas, if you ask them, or let me reframe that, you shouldn't ask them, are we allowed to do this? Because the answer will be no by default. And you're paying a lot of money for someone to say no, right? Because that's one learning that I had there. If you come in and ask, can I do this? They say no, 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 no. And you pay hundreds of euros per hour just to get that answer. So and this has shifted for me in the last year because I had so many lawyers involved for the current business. you really, they know it's hard, but you really have to understand, or they have to understand, they are there to find a, a, a legal way of operating in the current environment, knowing very well that the environment can change and will change, etc. Right? How can you operate? How can you still make it work? Right? That's what you want the lawyers for. To find a solution that's compliant, that doesn't get you into jail. And it's fine if there's even a little bit of gray area or risk involved, right? So we have processes or done things where I know there's still a little risk left, but I'm fine taking the risk, right? And this is also something that, especially in discussions with lawyer, where you want to be explicit, telling them, look, it's fine. This is fine. If this changes, that's fine. If there's still a risk and we can assess that properly, that is also fine. And then move forward nevertheless. And also to what you said with just defining who or what you are or what your business model is about is super important, right? Because otherwise you get the disadvantages of the combined of all the potential business models, right? I give you an example for our telehealth clinic. If I'm saying I'm operating a telehealth clinic, then people come and ask, where's your license? And they want to speak about the doctors, right? So I have to be compliant in that way. Or I could say, we are a technology provider. We provide a platform, and then it's between doctors and patients, but these are free to do whatever they want in the realms of the platform, right? Which allows me many more things to do that I couldn't do if I were a clinic. But if I say, okay, I leave that open, I can be a teleclinic, I can be a technology provider, then I still have, I have to think about all the implications or limitations imposed on each model, right? And then that would just make sure that you don't move, and then you have the effect that someone else will just bypass you while you're trying to play by the book, complying everywhere.
Exactly. And I'll tell you why this is hard is because, morally, right, you want to make sure that you are helping people, that you're helping your clients, that like a lot of regulations are there to protect people, right?
Yep.
But the question is, who are they protecting from? And so, for example, they might be protecting big industry that just wants to keep their profits. They might be protecting people and their health claims, and to make sure that they don't get sold medicine that will make them poisoned or something. And so, we've got to be careful that in the quest to challenge existing structures that are there because of a business model or a business environment that existed 100 years ago that's not relevant anymore, that we don't accidentally or purposefully hurt people, right? Because that's really the difference between uh, changing the system or getting in trouble and thrown in jail.
Yeah, and it makes sense. That there's protection in place for people, right? But sometimes, as I said, it can be outdated, or it's just solving, going for a symptom that doesn't really solve what they wanted to solve for. And I can only give you the most recent examples for that, which are still for the teleclinic. If you're following the public debate, then I mentioned these competitors that we have that are just saying, okay, fill in this question and off you go. And what's now happening, or the current discussion is that telehealth is a bad thing, and the government is trying to regulate this mostly for medical cannabis, and with the current telehealth clinics out there, but they're going for telehealth in general, or they're at least also focusing on that, which I think is the wrong thing, right? Because you want to, it helps so many people, especially elderly people, right, who cannot go and see a doctor, or if you're living in a countryside where there's not as much supply with doctors, then that also helps you to even see a doctor, right? But and this is something where we say, okay, the regulation generally is a good thing. But if they're going for a symptom and they're not thriving or solving this efficiently, then that's maybe something where you also have some room to say, okay, can we solve this differently? Well, like how can we work around it? Because it doesn't, like, you're still allowed to think for yourself. Like, does it even make sense? And are you like, what's also the downside involved in that? So yeah, you probably have to evaluate that for each limitation that you're dealing with separately.
I remember someone once telling me there's only interests. There's not a good guy and a bad guy. And when I ran into this with a previous company of mine, and so the previous company was tracking chemical regulations. What chemicals are banned, what's hazardous, what's not, and where can you use them. And at the time, there was a lot of question around carcinogenic uh, substances, like cobalt was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a real risk that all uses of cobalt were going to be banned within Europe. And one of the reasons that this was pushed forward was because it was carcinogenic, right? It causes cancer.
Yeah.
But it's in a battery and it's sealed up. It's not going to cause cancer. But one of the companies that was pushing it had found cobalt is used in an organic glue that binds metal to rubber. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
useful in tires. It's really useful in anything where you're trying to glue rubber to metal. And there was one company that found a solution that didn't use cobalt that would do the same thing. So they were pushing very hard for cobalt to be banned under the guise that it was
I see.
carcinogenic.
Oh, I see. And
So,
they
so
would win this.
they
Yeah.
would get an advantage. And in the end, their solution was so much more expensive to use that it actually would have hurt them more than helped them. But it also would have had the knock-on effects that even though they were focused on this gluing rubber to metal industry, it would have banned all lithium-ion batteries from Europe, and so obviously that couldn't go through, and so it's really difficult to navigate these things because there are strong arguments on either side, and the true answers to what should be the regulation or what should be the rules is very nuanced.
Yeah.
But when you're going in as a startup, you're not a lawmaker. You're not a lawyer. You're a startup. You're trying to do something new. You're trying to solve a problem that exists, and you have to go in and say, we're solving this problem. This is why we're going to solve the problem. If we don't solve the problem, it'll be a bigger problem. Now, lawmakers, now lawyers, now help us find a path to solve this problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I've just been thinking about the saying that all people said it's impossible until someone showed up and didn't know about it and just did it anyway, like something along the lines. I'm not sure how to translate to English, but it's I know it in German. And I think to some extent also ignorance is bliss, right? If I just compare all the business models that I've started or was involved with, they also the previous one in a climate tech space, they have so many stakeholders, regulations, etc. And if you see them, right, and if you're aware of them, that's really annoying, because then my first line of thinking is also, okay, are we even allowed to do this? And I think that's the wrong default. I don't like that, but I see that in myself more often, like whenever especially marketing wise, as I mentioned nowadays, if we want to do something, I feel like, oh, can we actually do this? And I see how it slows me down. It's really energy draining, because then I feel like I cannot make all these decisions. So to some extent, if you're not fully aware what all the regulations are, that can help to just say, okay, we'll try it. Okay. I mean, that still doesn't protect you if you do something super stupid, right? That, just to be clear, they can't say, I didn't know this, then you're still liable for that. But I mean, just given all these tactics that startups can employ, right? Whether that's guerrilla marketing, these kind of things, that's also not all allowed. But I think, yeah, you can still do this, especially in the early phases, to cover some ground and get started, and not try to hold yourself back with any of these limitations.
One of one of the things that I did a number of years ago was I had a different podcast. I think
Mhm.
I told you about it back
Yeah,
in 2019. One of the last episodes I recorded was an interview with Sam Bankman-Fried.
I've
Um,
heard the name before.
yeah, yeah. I think how many decades of prison is he doing now? But I mean, the thing is, he stole and defrauded billions of dollars, and it was
Yes.
from the very, very wealthy and powerful people. And when I talked to him, it was long before he was infamous for this. But what I find interesting is he's one of the few people who went to jail for
Yeah.
committing fraud in the crypto space. And the reason that he went was not an accident. He did not break rules because of ignorance. It was systematic. It was defrauding. It was on purpose. They even had like a web or a Slack channel called Wire Fraud, and yeah, they knew what they were doing.
Yes.
And I think generally with startups, there is a big tendency in founders to be nervous. Am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to try this new thing or go in a new way? The bigger danger for most founders is hesitancy and not getting something out there, because the fastest way to get the right answer to a question is to put the wrong answer in a public space, and a lot of smart people will tell you everything wrong with it. But and I think that we overestimate our own dangers and our own fears about the dangers, especially the legal risks or things like that. For the most part, like our bigger danger, or the danger of probably anyone listening to this, is probably going to be more hesitancy as opposed to more overt fraud, right?
Yep.
And so I certainly would never advocate for overt fraud, but I would definitely advocate for not being stymied by fear.
That's it for this episode of The Founder Experience. If you enjoyed it, do us a favor, hit subscribe wherever you are listening, whether that's Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. If you've got a second, leave a rating or a review. It really helps. And you can find more episodes and behind-the-scenes stuff on our website, founderexperience.fm. And if you've got feedback or business ideas that you want us to talk about, shoot us a message at hello@founderexperience.fm. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you next time.